Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
In case you don't know, as I mentioned earlier on, the radio industry, which I've been part of for the last 20 years or more, 25 years, is brutal. It is a brutal, brutal industry. I can't tell you how brutal it can be by times. You know, I've spoken to people and friends of mine throughout the years working in different radio stations, and 1 minute they're flying and their figures are up and blah, 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 and all of a sudden the boss comes along and goes, we're replacing you. And people say, why don't you just get a job somewhere else? It's one of those very few industries that doesn't expand. And the reason it doesn't expand is because there's licensing laws around it. And as we speak at the moment, for example, in Dublin, there's 14 radio stations. I don't know how many there is across the whole country. We've only got 2 national radio stations, really, which is, we've 3, actually, 2FM, Radio 1, and Today FM. Newstalk is not national. It's what they call quasi-national. We're not national. We're multi-city, which means we broadcast in all the major cities like Cork, Limerick, Galway, Dublin, and parts of Meath and Clare. So there's different licenses. So it's not as easy as that just to get another job, because the industry doesn't get any bigger, and it's not going to get any bigger. If you look at the modern world of technology, the industry is going to get smaller. But people lose their jobs, of course, and in all industries, as I said, but this one in particular is not for the faint-hearted. But tonight I want to speak to one man who's a radio DJ who over the course of his career has experienced the highs and the lows. As I said earlier on, one week you're cock of the walk, the next week you're a feather duster. And one particular low led him to a period of self-reflection where he began therapy and ended up totally changing his relationship with alcohol. And he joins me on the air. Keith Walsh. Keith, good evening to you.
Hi Niall, how are you? I'd say your listeners now feel terribly sorry for me, the man who has a radio job and now doesn't have a radio job. I'd say they're crying into their radio as we speak.
I mean, the breakfast show was big. The 2FM breakfast show at the time, Breakfast Republic, yourself and Bernard and Jennifer Maguire. Jennifer still, as we know, was on 2FM. Not too sure about I'm not too sure what Bernard is doing now. Where's Bernard now? Is he doing podcast?
Limerick.
Is he doing
in Limerick?
Oh, okay.
Scratching Lars. He does other work. He was working as like a kind of cool creative guy in one of these Google type companies for a while, and but he's out doing, he does stuff like, you know, the Marty Party, the live show with Marty Morrissey, and I think he gave up the stand up for a while. He gave up showbiz for a while just to kind of find himself, like we all do, you know.
Fine. I love that line. I'm going to find myself. You've had all your life to do that, pal. And
you find yourself, and then you realise you were just the same dick you've always been. You know?
But I mean, you were with community radio, as most DJs started off in community radio. Then you went to Phantom. Sadly, Phantom never really did very well. I think they probably only reached about 1% of the market at one stage. I think that was probably the height of it, unfortunately. It didn't do as well as expected because it came at a time that was too late for what they call alternative music. But then you went to 2FM, of course, and you were extremely successful. It was great, I suppose, to be in that position. Breakfast show, national radio station, public service broadcaster, big wage, big salary, Keith, I'm sure. I don't know what your salary was. Yeah, it was probably 150, 200 grand. I don't know what it was. So, yeah. Well, I mean, it probably was. I mean, it was in and around that. So, I mean,
it wasn't.
You thought you were the bee's knees, and then is it okay for you to tell me about the day that you lost your job? Yeah.
Now, first of all, I do believe people think that you're on big money, and it's not a bad wage. And there's other ways of making money because of it as well.
Tell me about it. Yeah, it's not a bad.
I didn't ever at any point think I was, or feel like I was cock up the walk, because I felt like I landed in this job sort of by mistake, as a sort of an imposter, a bit of an imposter syndrome going on there. But I did the job and I worked hard at it. So it was a 5-year, like we had big listeners, but we didn't at the start. Like, we have the listenership from Hector. So, like, our first couple of books, we went down by 50%.
Okay. For the audience who don't know about books, we know about them. These are called JNLR books. So basically, it's a listenership survey. It's the only one in the country that's ongoing all year round. And for people who work in the radio, it's like the Leave Insert. Every 3 months.
Yeah, and we failed miserably in our first couple of books. So we the listenership halved. So there's half the people that used to listen to Hector were gone, and we had half of them that were left. So we had to work hard to build that back up again, which we did. But it took us a long time. And then by year 3 or 4, year 5, and as you know now, we got like this, a 1 year contract, a year and a half contract. You know, you're always kept on your toes. Seems to be the style in 2FM down through the years. So we were always fucking like working hard, putting in the hours, getting like making it happen, because you knew like if you didn't make it happen, you'd be gone. You know?
Yeah, but that's
And this
always
for
there with
me-
RT. RT were always short contracts. I heard Gabe Byrne said he was on a 3-month contract or something like that for his whole life. So RT
Yeah.
were always short contracts.
Yeah, poor old Jerry couldn't, really struggled with the stress, and he was the most successful radio presenter possibly, apart from Gable, that the country ever produced. But so that just seems to be the style. I don't know how they benefit from that. Anyway, so by year 5, you're kind of like, we've got the numbers up, we're flying a little bit, we're starting to feel a bit, okay, this is working. And then it's like, you guys are too old, so we need to replace you. So if you ask me about the day it happened, there wasn't really a day in that. There was a point where we started talking about what's happening next. Jen was going to leave the breakfast show. Was it going to be me and Bernard and somebody else? What was going to happen? Would we continue? And then it kind of just got a bit loose and hairy, and nobody knew what was going on. The communication sort of dropped a little bit.
And what was it like doing the show during that period? Because, doing a breakfast show relies on chemistry. It relies on you being in good mood. So it must have been difficult then. It was a bit cold, I imagine, knowing that, listen, we're probably all out the gap here in a short while. And so how do you make comedy and how do you make things sound fun?
Well, you see, we've always been, we had done the show sort of in a sort of we'd always felt under pressure. So, like if you think of the first year where we had half the listeners we were supposed to have and they were gone, we were like, are we getting sacked soon? But we have to keep going. And then that just kind of continued. It was always sort of like a tense sort of outside the show. But once the show started, the fader went up, we just had a laugh. So it was like a relief.
Make the best of it, like, while we're
yeah,
on.
But you put on a show, you become a character, whatever. It's not real. It's just like, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. Like, say whatever. It might, like, you're basically 3 people in a room trying to make each other laugh. And you know what it's like if you're at a funeral, things are even funnier. Do you know what I mean? And if you actually, do you know what I mean?
They are, yeah. They are.
The most terrible things at a funeral. So that was kind of the way it was. But we had fun, we had a laugh. And I think for me, I wasn't too worried with the breakfast show finishing up, because honestly, I worked in RTE. I've been there 5 years, did a really good job. I thought, sure, they'll just move me somewhere.
What, they'll move you to Gold or the Weekend?
Well, yeah, I mean, I ended up doing Gold for a little while during lockdown.
What was it somebody said to me years ago? Well, don't worry, we've another job for you. We're moving you to nighttime. We're moving you to 4 a.m. to 6. Your primary audience will be asleep.
Yeah. I did weekends for a while. I did weekends for a while, and it nearly killed me because I missed my pals. I missed the crack of being on air with somebody else, and I'm not really a jock. Like, wouldn't be good just.
Yeah, neither am I. No, I'd be bored out of my head doing that. Yeah,
I don't have that skill. But yeah, they moved me out to weekends. But I genuinely, at the time when the breakfast show finished up, I thought, oh, they'll give me something else. I ended up like this knocking on every door in RTE. I ended up like panhandling for a job in RTE, Joe Duffy going, any chance of a start, bud. And that's how it felt for about a year, because I thought because I kind of hung around I was on weekends, I still had full contract kind of, and then that was going to end, and I was like, I need to get some. I felt desperate. I felt so desperate. I have to stay on RTE. There's nothing else out there for me. And I felt my worth was attached to this job I had. So I was the type of person.
So did you become institutionalized?
I don't know, but I thought, I think I grew up thinking, if you have a great job, that's like, you need to work towards getting a great job or some sort of notoriety in some field, so that when you meet people at a party or you meet people outside your house, or your wife would be impressed with you, or whatever. So you'd have something to talk about. So yes, I'm Keith Walsh and I'm on the radio. So that's part of who you are. It was only like when it all kind of stopped and I had to face myself and go to therapy and figure out who I was, that I realized I should never have attached my career, my job, and the success of that to who I was and the success I was as a person. And me being successful as a radio presenter or whatever it was did not mean I was a successful person or I was having a good life. It probably meant the opposite. So I just needed, at the time when it finished up, I was so attached to, it was such a part of who I was. I was like, I need to I need something else. I need a thing to
Is it the
latch
outlet?
onto
It was the
to
outlet.
make me
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
remember that I had a similar
what am I gonna say
situation.
at the-
Many, many years ago, I worked for another radio station, a big radio station in Dublin. And, I lost my job there. And I remember that feeling that you talk about. That because I'm a talk show host, I get to spout my opinion off all night and all day, right? And, I had nowhere, I had no outlet for that. Now, we didn't have social media at the time, so I couldn't just go on Twitter and rant about everybody. So it was that feeling of not being able to tell everybody how I felt because I was doing that, for so many years. And it's a terrible, I know the feeling that you're talking about. It's an awful
But
feeling.
also, you'll remember, and I know people will be listening to this going, "Oh, poor Keith, poor Niall." But you'll remember, if you lose your job in radio, it's a public position, so people know, and you have listeners, and then you have people who say they don't listen, but they somehow know everything about the show. But when you get the sack from the job, you are the public spokesperson for the fact that you got the sack. So you're the person that's going to the shop in Tesco in Newbridge, and you're meeting people who are asking you what happened. And you're the person who has to explain what happened. And the person who sacked you is sitting in a fucking office, and no one knows what they look like, and no one ever asks them about what happened.
Mm.
So you're literally the spokesperson for your own sacking, and you have to explain everything. Because people are devastated. Some people are delighted. But people you meet, and they're, "Oh my God, what happened there? They should never, blah, blah, blah." And then you have to console them. You've been sacked, and you're going to have to be grand. It'll be grand. Don't worry about it. Sure, look at
She'll get
whatever.
some. But people always say to you, people actually, don't worry, you'll get something else. You're great.
Yeah.
They don't know the radio industry.
They don't know what it's like. But
No.
but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, to be honest with you. in my
Okay,
whole life.
but so did you turn? It mentions zero alcohol. Did you turn to the drink? Obviously, your best friend.
Well, I didn't know if I turned to the drink, but I definitely drink got me through the 5 years, and probably I worked in radio for 20 years, so radio is I'd never drank during the week because I was working, and I usually do breakfast radio, so I was on breakfast radio, so I didn't really drink during the week. But Friday, so you'd sort of just get through the week almost like on the fumes of the energy that the cortisol or whatever hormone you're using when you're on air. So you get up, you've got adrenaline for 3 hours in the breakfast show, and then you sort of survive the rest of the day on the fumes of that adrenaline. Then you kind of crash at some stage and go to sleep. And then do that for 4 days, 5 days, and then Friday comes. Friday, I'll drink 2 bottles of wine, and then it's Saturday, I'll drink several pints and a bottle of wine, and then it's Sunday. You sort of try and you sober up, and you try and get to bed early, which you can't. So you generally don't sleep all of Sunday night. You get straight up out of bed, looking at your alarm clock, turn it off before it even goes off, and try and go in and do a breakfast show on a Monday morning. And that was a cycle for me for years, So I wouldn't have said I hit the drink when it happened, but that was my way of drinking. And it was, I suppose, it was going to therapy, dealing with my, traumas. I'm sure you love talking about past traumas and dealing with them. And it was then that I started dealing with all that shit that was going on in my head from way before radio, when I was young, and that I started to feel better. And it just got to a point where I was being offered a drink, and I thought, actually, do you know what? I know how I feel when I drink. I know how I feel after I drink. And actually, right now, I feel much better than I will, so I'm not going to drink. And that just kind of became a thing, and I haven't drank in 3 years. So I wouldn't say I had a problem with drink or I hit the bottle, but drink was definitely
it was a crutch. Yeah, it was a crutch. Yeah,
it was a crutch. Yeah.
So
And it was great to be able to drop it then.
So what was the turning point then where you got over that kind of depression, should I say, or that trauma of losing your job and and relying on the drink, where you said, "This is my new life, and I'm now happy with this. This is me going forward." Where was that turning point, or when was that?
I think it was a few years or a few months into therapy. It was my wife that made the suggestion around the time I finished up on 2FM. I was still, actually, I finished up the breakfast show. I was still doing weekends and that kind of stuff, and it was it was heartbreaking for some reason. I found it very difficult, but I did it. You know, it's a job. You do.
Yeah, the
you
weekend
do
shifts, that idea in 2FM particularly, or an RTE, it doesn't so much happen, by the way, in local radio or in independent radio. They normally just shaft you and that's the end of it. They don't bring you back on for the weekend, but they do seem to do that in RTE. It's kind of like almost the pity job, you know what I mean? Actually, we better give him something, you know? You know?
Yeah.
And we'll move him out slowly.
Yeah, and you do it because you have to pay the mortgage or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to pay bills, and you do it. And
Not
you don't
good for your self-esteem, really, is it? Do you know what I mean?
you don't seem ungrateful. But anyway, I was doing that, and then I was going to therapy. And I remember the therapist, my friend, who's my friend now, Luke, was my therapist. And I remember him talking to me about vulnerability, and I didn't really understand what he meant. He was talking about this word vulnerability. I thought vulnerability meant, like, being vulnerable meant cycling without a helmet or playing hurling without a helmet or something. You're leaving yourself vulnerable. And then at one week, we just kept talking. I met him every week, and at one point he was talking about this vulnerability, and it sort of clicked for me. I understood what he meant. Like, to me, I was like, okay, so what you mean is vulnerability is to be able to talk to people about how you actually feel. So to stop masking all the time, to stop looking at people, to not sitting down with your wife of an evening and telling her everything's grand and you feel great and you're the future's all bright and everything's cool, when in actual fact, when she's not in the room, or when you're trying to sleep on a Sunday night and you've got the jitters from drinking, that you're absolutely having almost like panic attack levels of anxiety so much that you can't sleep, but you're not telling anybody about these fears, not telling anybody, you're not sharing these problems. And at the start, I suppose I was probably going into therapy going, I don't really know why I'm here, everything's grand or whatever. And then the vulnerability word lands, and then you start actually sharing things about your childhood, about your parents.
I was going to ask you about those traumas. You talked about traumas from the past as well. And I don't want you to talk about anything you're not comfortable talking about. But, what were those traumas?
I'm a vulnerable open book. Well, I mean, I grew up like a lot of people did. And look, I'm conscious of talking to you about traumas growing up because, I grew up in a household. I had a mom and a dad. My dad, we didn't really need for anything. Kind of, we it was the 80s. People didn't have much. It was fine. We lived in a housing estate. But I grew up with my mom was, I probably looking back on it now, probably had some sort of person abuse was a thing, was normal. It was just you did something minor and you'd be sent off to a room to wait for about an hour. And then an hour later, you'd hear footsteps up the stairs or whatever, and then you would be given your beating.
Given a hiding. Yeah.
But, not a slap across the back of the legs. Do you know what I mean? There was
a good
hiding. There was belts, there was slippers, there was, whatever was
available.
Store.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was humiliation, and it was all the time, and that was sort of like the method of, but that was what was going on inside the house, and it wasn't just me.
And it must have been hard then, for you carrying that throughout your life, that you felt that if you failed or did something wrong, you get a hiding, you get a beating.
You get a hiding, but also there was the shame of it happening.
Yeah.
And also outside of our house, you would have thought we were the Von Trapp family.
Yeah.
It only happened in the house. Like, nobody would really believe it happened. It was a violent house. There was a lot of, I grew up with a lot of fear of adults, fear of authority, fear of life nearly. Do you know what I mean?
And by the way, did that reflect, I'm just curious now, because I think of myself in my own personal situation, and I deal constantly with insecurities and paranoia, right? So, and that comes from childhood as well, right? But do you find that then when you're in a position, say in 2FM, and your boss, and your figures aren't good, do you find yourself then panicking and insecure that I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my house then, I'm going to lose my house, I can't afford my car, my wife's going to be disappointed in me? Was all that going through your head then constantly? Yeah,
that was kind of the way I was for a long time. I always felt like I shouldn't be here. I always felt like I was in trouble. I went around feeling like I was in trouble with somebody, and this kind of like shame as a bad person. Like this sort of a sense of doom, like that you're a bad person.
Catastrophizing everything. Yeah.
And
if you got an email saying, listen, any chance we can have a chat in the office later on, immediately you shit yourself.
I'd shit myself. I couldn't sleep most Sunday nights because I'd think of all these terrible things that are going to happen the next day. I would be paranoid about what people were thinking about me and how, you know, I just, you know, I was doing probably, you know, a show that most people who are on radio would love to have a crack at, but yet I felt like
well, you did know. I mean, you did know. I mean, and I know. I mean, look, I'm in a very lucky position. I've been here for 12 years, right? And I held another, you know, radio station. I probably worked in a few good few with them at this stage. But what I'm saying is, but you did know that radio, and we're not naive, none of us. It's fickle, and that most people only last a couple of years in a gig, unless it's doing really well. Breakfast shows take a little bit longer to bed in, etc., etc. But unless they're doing really well, they're not going to last. That's just the way radio people move from one station to another. So you kind of knew that too, didn't you? I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, but you're always hopeful that you're going to be, you know, you want to be that person who's unsackable. You want to be the Ian Dempsey, you know, on the Breakfast Show forever and ever.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, you hope that you're going to get that gig that's going to see it to retirement, and you know, you will, you know, you will be paid enough money so you don't have to worry about the mortgage anymore. But it, you know, when you kind of almost get there, but it doesn't quite happen. But you've worked your ass off, and you've worked your ass off on something like you work your ass off on that show, right? You put everything into that show, this show now, right?
Yeah.
But for somebody else to come along and say that's not happening anymore, and you're like, but I built this thing. Yeah. And you're telling me
I've just spent 12 years of my life working day and night in this radio station. What do you mean I can't do it anymore?
How many sacrifices do you constantly make for that? Like I sacrificed, like my family probably definitely missed out because I was either too tired or too caught up in what was happening the next day or too worried or whatever. And, you know, so family life suffered. And it's not, it's a crazy thing to do, but you put your heart and soul into it because you believe it's the hope that'll kill you. You believe it's going to be different for you, and then you build this thing, and then someone else just takes it away from you, and then you're
Keith,
left.
I am so disappointed that I only had a half an hour to talk to you, and that time is just flying in, right? And I've got literally 2 minutes left. You know what it's like in radio, right? So I have 2 minutes left, and I want to know what you're doing now and how happy you are now, and when's the book coming out? And I mean that, I don't mean that sarcastically, but I think there's a book in it.
Yeah, hopefully. I have talked to people about the book. There is a play that people can go and see. It's a one-man show, and it's me, when I finished up in radio, going to therapy, learning about my childhood, going back, fixing all that, and then realising, actually, you know, I'm content with the way life is.
And are you content? Are you happy now?
Yeah, well, I'd be happy now if I just tell people it's on in the Whale in Greystones.
It's the Whale in Greystones on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, but yes, now I'm content because I look around and I go, oh yeah, I can sit in my own house and feel comfortable and not feel like something's wrong. And I work for a company called Think House. They're brilliant. I work for them 3 days a week. I do PR, marketing. I write a bit. I wrote a play. I do whatever I want, kind of. I help, you know, I do a bit of consulting.
And you're making a living.
I'm making a great living, and I just sort of like I pick jobs that I like, and I work with people that I like, and I don't worry about, you know, somebody knocking down a house that I just spent 5 years building, you know?
Yeah. I mean, would you go back into radio tomorrow if you were offered a job?
Yeah, but sure, if somebody, like, I would go to any job if it looked like good fun.
Yeah, I know. It's like radio's like a disease. It's like it's in your blood, and it doesn't matter how many times they kick you; you'll still go back for more.
Yeah, but I did have a meeting with somebody, and they said, "Oh, well, do you want to come in over Christmas and cover a few shifts, and we'll see how you sound on the radio station?" I was like, "You know what? Nah, I'm okay."
See how you sound.
Yeah.
What do you think I'm going to sound like? We're talking here now. What do you think I'm going to sound like?
You're going to sound different on a different radio.
Keith, it's been lovely talking to you. And listen, I'd love to have a conversation again with you someday because it's so intriguing, and I think we've a lot in common too. But in saying that, if people want to go and see the play that you've written about your experiences, how you dealt with that trauma, go to therapy, and how you turned your life back around again after one of the biggest disappointments you probably received, losing the big gig, as they call it. You can go to the Whale. It's in Greystones, and it's on Saturday night. What time is it on?
Oh, show, I think, usual 8 o'clock.
Tickets
Check
are
the
just
website.
pay at the door. What is it? Just
Yeah.
pay
Either.
Yeah,
Either
cash,
or,
cash only, no
Yeah,
cards.
cash.
And Revolut.
Yeah. Revolut me now. And I'll figure it out.
Keith, it's been lovely talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. All right, I appreciate it.
You need to get your producer, Jane, is it?
Jane, yeah.
Yeah, get Jane. She's really good.
Yeah.
Put her on air. Brilliant.
I
See
know.
ya.
Yeah, she does come on the air every now and again. She's mad as a
Exactly,
brush.
right.
She, by the way, Keith, she's the biggest lefty you'll ever come across in your life. That's why we get on so well, because I'm the biggest old
Yeah.
fogey conservative. You know what I mean?
She's the foil. She helps you. She
Yeah,
helps you, man.
absolutely.
She was sent to you. She was sent to you.
Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio, the multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.